It's terrible that after 50 years, it is behind closed doors.
The grand annual parade known as Trooping the Color has always been celebrated across the globe as a magnificent demonstration of military precision, historic discipline, and unbroken sovereign tradition. To the millions of onlookers watching from the streets of London and through television screens worldwide, the event represents the ultimate showcase of royal harmony, where the entire family gathers to honor the reigning monarch. However, beneath the polished surface of the pageantry and behind the heavily guarded doors of the palace, a quiet storm was gathering that would permanently shatter the peace before the first trumpet could even sound. The catalyst for this unprecedented internal rupture was a single, long-forgotten piece of paper that was placed upon the desk of the Prince of Wales. Senior palace lawyers, while conducting a routine review of historic constitutional files, had uncovered a deeply hidden decree wrapped in archaic legal phrasing. This archival document was not merely a collection of old rules. It carried the immense weight of historical sovereign authority, specifically restricting non-working, extended relatives connected solely by marriage from occupying prominent, public-facing ceremonial positions during major state events. When Prince William read the document, he did not hesitate for a single second. Recognizing the profound institutional implications of the text, the future king immediately enforced a hidden decree, effectively barring Queen Camilla's daughter from taking her anticipated place within the official royal formation. What was supposed to be a day of joyous national celebration instantly transformed into a tense, private reckoning, creating a profound fracture within the royal household that no one could ignore or minimize. Prince William sat in his morning briefing room, his eyes fixed on the legal document for far longer than any of his advisors had anticipated. The future monarch had walked into the meeting expecting nothing more than a routine, administrative discussion regarding the upcoming parade logistics, but he instead found himself staring at an institutional turning point that would inevitably alienate members of his own family. In the delicate ecosystem of the British monarchy, an event like Trooping the Color is never just a harmless display of historical costumes and military music. Inside the ancient stone walls of the palace, every single position allocated on the balcony, every invitation issued, and every step along the procession route serves as a highly calculated public signal. These placements tell the global public exactly who belongs at the sacred, powerful center of the crown, and who must remain on the outside of its working core. This precise reality is exactly why the newly uncovered decree carried such devastating weight. The legal experts meticulously explained to the prince that the historical order functioned as an absolute barrier, blocking any extended relative who does not perform official, full-time royal duties from accessing sovereign ceremonial positions unless they receive explicit, written authorization from both the direct heir to the throne and the senior household officers. William understood the gravity of the situation in an instant. This was not a minor dispute over seating arrangements or a petty disagreement regarding event invitations. It was a drawing a definitive, constitutional line in the sand. Queen Camilla's daughter had arrived that week fully expecting a quiet, seamless inclusion into the family's public appearance, which made the sudden enforcement of the rule feel exceptionally sharp and painful. She had not entered the palace gates demanding a crown, nor had she ever sought to insert herself into the political complexities of the institution. Yet the entire atmosphere within the royal corridors shifted dramatically the exact moment her name appeared on the draft preparation lists. A senior royal aide was tasked with delivering the delicate update. He stepped toward her in a private gallery, lowered his voice to a whisper, and gently but firmly redirected her away from the scheduled ceremonial route, deliberately avoiding eye contact out of a sense of profound awkwardness. That small, silent refusal to meet her gaze conveyed far more than any formal, typed announcement ever could. Somewhere nearby within the vast estate, Queen Camilla sensed a sudden shift in atmosphere long before anyone gathered the courage to tell her the unvarnished truth, and the Queen Consort's usual confidence rapidly hardened into a cold, paralyzing dread. King Charles received the official update just minutes later in his private study. The reigning monarch slowly removed his glasses, placed them carefully beside the legal brief, and remained completely silent for a long time. He knew precisely what his eldest son had done, and he understood the deep, constitutional reasons that motivated the prince's decision, but possessing that logical understanding did not soften the immense personal pain of the moment. Camilla's daughter had suddenly become the involuntary human face of a rigid institutional rule that extended far beyond a single morning parade. Prince William had not merely crossed a name off a guest list. He had publicly reestablished a core principle of the modern monarchy, confirming that a marriage to the reigning sovereign does not automatically grant ceremonial power or public status to every branch of a private, blended family. Queen Camilla felt the sting of the wound long before the formal discussions even commenced. She recognized that while this decision directly impacted her daughter's immediate standing, its true reach extended toward her own long-term influence and authority within the royal household. If Prince William possessed the power to enforce this hidden decree now, he could effortlessly enforce similar boundaries in the future, proving that the crown would always speak through its direct bloodline. The palace apparatus obeyed the future king's command, but before the decree could alter the public face of the ceremony, it had to tear directly through the fragile personal lives of the individuals standing closest to the throne. Every major royal crisis in history begins with cold names typed on official stationery, but it becomes genuinely dangerous when those names belong to real people who feel suddenly betrayed, exposed, and completely cornered. Prince William viewed the enforcement of the decree as an act of absolute protection for the crown, while Queen Camilla perceived it as a calculated, public humiliation. King Charles could only watch as a painful wound opened within the heart of his own home, while Camilla's daughter, trapped helplessly between historical ceremony and complicated family bloodlines, became the exact focal point where the palace's oldest laws collided with modern family dynamics. William carried the immense burden of this decision, like a man who knew that the eyes of history were already watching his every move. The prince fully understood that his role as the Prince of Wales was no longer just about waiting patiently to inherit the crown. He had officially become the active guardian of the monarchy's next chapter, the one individual expected to draw hard lines before personal emotions could blur the boundaries of the state forever. For William, this was never a question of personal dislike, petty revenge, or emotional coldness toward his stepfamily. It was an issue of absolute constitutional clarity. The monarchy relies entirely on a clear, unbroken order of public rank and ceremonial authority to prevent the institution from devolving into a private family enterprise. If that structural order cracked during a major event like trooping the color, the damage would not remain contained. It would be observed, analyzed, and repeated across future generations. Princess Catherine knew that the intense silence surrounding her husband was far heavier than standard anger. She sat quietly with him in the hours leading up to the confrontation, watching him weigh every single word with meticulous, painful care. The princess understood that while compassion could soften the delivery of the news, it could never alter the legal reality of the decree. William genuinely did not want to humiliate Camilla's daughter, nor did he wish to inflict unnecessary emotional distress upon his father. Yet he was equally aware that once a non-working individual is placed at the center of a sovereign ceremony, the public inevitably interprets it as an official endorsement of permanence and power. That was a core reason why the decision could not be delayed, as a single name on an official list could alter the message sent to the entire nation. Camilla's daughter had entered the day under the impression that her position within the extended family circle had been quietly and permanently accepted. She was never a political player or a strategist trying to manipulate palace affairs, but rather a vulnerable figure caught in the crossfire of ancient royal laws. When King Charles finally broke the news to Camilla, the queen consort did not break out into an angry outburst. Instead, she gripped the back of a nearby chair, her entire posture freezing as a heavy, shocking silence filled the room. King Charles felt a profound divide widening between his wife and his son, recognizing his wife's deep sense of humiliation while simultaneously sharing William's institutional fears. A senior legal advisor had already explicitly warned the prince that ignoring the decree would establish a dangerous precedent that would be virtually impossible to reverse in the future. Even more troubling was the fact that the specific wording of the document suggested this exact vulnerability had been anticipated decades ago by previous courtiers who feared the overexpansion of the ceremonial family. Now, that historical warning had found its moment of enforcement, leaving the palace to grapple with a collision of duty and emotion that was only just beginning to unfold. The hidden decree did not suddenly detonate within the private lives of the royal family by some random accident. It had been waiting in total silence, tightly sealed within the dark corners of the archives, until a single, unannounced rehearsal exposed a dangerous boundary the palace could no longer ignore. What initially appeared to the casual observer as a minor trivial question regarding seating arrangements during a state ceremony quickly became the ultimate catalyst that forced senior legal scholars into ancient filing cabinets, turned trusted aides into whispering conspirators, and pushed Prince William directly into the very role he had spent years preparing for yet secretly dreading. He was now the one man inside the institution who possessed the absolute fortuity to say no when every other senior figure hesitated or looked away out of politeness. William first detected the quiet danger during a highly restricted, closed-door balcony rehearsal for the upcoming state parade. Without his direct knowledge, Queen Camilla's daughter had been quietly, almost invisibly added to a draft placement schedule, positioned directly alongside senior, working members of the bloodline. The small administrative change moved through the highly synchronized palace departments like a soft, untraceable footstep that no courtier wanted to openly acknowledge or challenge. In the grand vocabulary of British royal protocol, a placement on the Buckingham Palace balcony means infinitely more than simply standing near an open window to watch airplanes fly by. It serves as a monumental, universally understood public signal of internal closeness, a visual message that the entire global press corps will instantly read as a sign of permanent rank, official approval, and long-term institutional belonging. This was the exact reason why that quiet addition carried such massive constitutional danger. It did not announce itself with a loud proclamation. It entered the system as a soft whisper. But that whisper was more than enough to awaken an ancient institutional anxiety that had long protected the crown from internal expansion. A highly experienced protocol secretary happened to notice the unfamiliar name on the document just before the daily rehearsal notes disappeared into the massive pile of routine afternoon paperwork. This particular secretary had served the institution for multiple decades, long enough to personally remember a tightly sealed ceremonial restriction originally drafted during the late Queen's historic reign. That ancient rule had been specifically created to protect sovereign-facing events, meaning ceremonies that are directly and explicitly connected to monarch's public authority, from becoming diluted, blurred, or compromised by the private expansion of the extended, non-working family. The addition of the name on the paper seemed completely harmless on the surface, but small, uncontested changes inside the delicate architecture of the crown have a dangerous habit of becoming permanent fixtures if no one possesses the courage to challenge them immediately. That was the core institutional trap that William recognized. If Queen Camilla's daughter stood on that historic balcony just once alongside the working royals, the palace administration would later struggle immensely to explain to the public why she could not stand there again at the next state event. Prince William carefully reviewed the draft document in his study, and his pen stopped moving the exact moment it reached her name. The prince did not say a word to the surrounding aides because he knew that in the world of high protocol, temporary silence is always interpreted as permanent approval. He knew with absolute certainty that if he chose to look away now out of desire to maintain family harmony, that silence would be weaponized against the structure of the monarchy in the future. Princess Catherine understood the immense internal pressure building upon his shoulders long before the wider royal household even realized the crisis was unfolding. She knew that her husband was not acting out of desire to protect rigid, dusty protocols for the sake of mere tradition. He was actively protecting the very meaning of royal duty itself, safeguarding the fragile, essential line that separates private family affection from national sovereign symbolism. Queen Camilla eventually heard to the palace grapevine that her daughter's placement on the balcony list was being formally questioned by the heir's office, and she immediately took the challenge as a direct, deeply personal insult. The queen consort angrily questioned senior household officials, demanding to know why her side of the family was constantly treated as temporary visitors, welcomed with warmth and private behind closed doors, but systematically restricted the moment the public cameras turned on. Her emotional hurt was entirely real, and so was her escalating anger. Yet the palace legal team had already discovered exactly what everyone secretly feared they might find in the dark historical archives. Buried within a dusty ceremonial file marked for high-level review only when non-working relatives were actively proposed for sovereign-facing roles, the hidden decree waited with cold, mathematical precision. The historical document did not contain any personal attacks against Camilla's daughter, which actually made it infinitely harder for the queen consort to fight or legally challenge. It simply drew a hard, uncompromising institutional perimeter around blood succession, official working status, and public ceremonial visibility. Prince William understood at that exact moment that he could no longer allow palace aides to carry this heavy constitutional burden for him. Queen Camilla needed to hear the unvarnished institutional truth directly from the source. That buried rehearsal note had now directly triggered the face-to-face confrontation that every single member of the family had been desperately trying to avoid. And this time, there would be no quiet corridor whispers or administrative delays to hide behind. The heavy confrontation did not open with loud shouting or dramatic gestures. It commenced with the quiet click of a heavy wooden door, a thick legal folder bound in ribbon, and Prince William standing resolutely beside a highly polished council table as Queen Camilla entered the room with King Charles walking only a single step behind her. The heavy, suffocating silence that filled the space was infinitely worse than any sudden outburst of anger could have been. Every individual inside that private room knew precisely why the emergency meeting had been called, but absolutely no one wanted to be the first to articulate the painful sentence that would permanently divide family loyalty from the rigid laws of the crown. William had specifically requested this high-level meeting before the final, official instructions for the state parade could be handed down to the working household staff. He knew with absolute certainty that once those logistical orders moved out of the private offices and into the wider palace machinery, the final decision would no longer belong to the individuals in that room. It would belong to the unyielding record of the monarchy itself. The official instructions were the definitive working blueprints for the entire state ceremony. The exact orders that directed security details, transport teams, and military coordinators on precisely where each person would stand, how they would move, and when they would appear before the world. That was the reason why the timing of the moment mattered so intensely. If Camilla's daughter remained on that list when the orders were distributed, the palace would be granting its tacit, official approval to a new precedent. If her name vanished after this meeting, the emotional wound within the private family would become deeply personal and impossible to heal. Princess Catherine had intentionally chosen not to place herself at the absolute center of this unfolding family storm, but her quiet presence in the hours leading up to the meeting still carried immense weight. Equals. She had sat peacefully with William in the final, silent minutes before the door opened, reminding him without needing many words that institutional restraint is never a sign of internal weakness. The princess fully understood that his future duty as king required an unyielding firmness, but she also knew with deep empathy that the human cost of that firmness would follow him long after the parade ended. William carried that heavy psychological knowledge into the room. He did not enter the space as an angry son seeking conflict or trying to assert dominance. He entered as the future sovereign facing a monumental decision that absolutely no one else within the household possessed the courage to own. Queen Camilla broke the suffocating silence first, asking William with sharp tone whether he truly understood the devastating emotional impact this exclusion would have on her daughter's life. The direct question landed in the room with the immense, bruising force of a personal accusation. The Queen Consort was no longer asking about technical protocol or legal decrees. She was demanding to know whether her children would always be forced to stand near the glitter of the monarchy without ever truly belonging to its legally protected center. William answered her with an incredibly measured, respectful voice. He looked directly at her and said that he understood exactly why the decision caused such deep personal pain, but he then made it completely clear that simply understanding someone's emotional pain does not give a future monarch the right to erase the standing laws of the institution. King Charles attempted to step in to soften the heavy blow that was rapidly descending upon his wife. The king spoke softly of maintaining family dignity, choosing a better strategic timing, and avoiding any unnecessary public humiliation for the family. But his voice noticeably faltered the moment William placed the ancient legal folder directly onto the polished table. The prince did not raise his voice a single octave, nor did he need to use an angry tone to convey his point. He calmly stated that the royal household simply did not possess the constitutional authority to rewrite an active sovereign rule for one specific family, not even for the wife of the reigning king, and certainly not for someone who had entered the week believing the matter was already permanently settled. That single, unyielding sentence completely changed the entire atmosphere of the room. Queen Camilla realized in that exact second that the hidden decree reached far beyond a single balcony appearance at morning parade. It effectively limited every future attempt to position her children inside the formal, sacred rituals of the British state, without proper constitutional authority. William confirmed the absolute final decision face to face. stating that her daughter would not appear in the ceremonial formation. Camilla left the room first, deeply wounded and completely silent, while King Charles remained behind, looking utterly trapped between his deep love for his wife and his sacred oath to the law. A royal exclusion within the modern British monarchy can happen with a single line of ink on official paper, requiring no grand public statements. It manifests simply as a name quietly removed from a schedule, a seat reassigned, and a family left to absorb the reality that the palace machine has spoken. For Queen Camilla's daughter, this sudden humiliation was executed with a private, clinical precision. She received the unalterable news in a secluded side room, insulated from the morning preparations. The newly revised operational schedule had already begun its rapid movement through the various household departments, carrying the evidence of her absence like a sealed verdict. In royal administration, an official schedule functions as the legal blueprint that instructs security and transport on exactly who is authorized to appear close to the sovereign. This change did not merely adjust physical movement. It redrew the internal boundaries of institutional belonging. She lowered her phone and asked a single question, demanding to know if her mother already knew the truth. No one in the room answered quickly, and that heavy pause told her infinitely more than any bureaucratic explanation could. Palace staff had been strictly instructed to treat the adjusted document as final and non-negotiable. There would be no last-minute rescue by King Charles, and no emotional exception carved out by Queen Camilla. Prince William's decision had hardened into an absolute command. Queen Camilla sat completely alone after the doors closed, and the protective anger that carried her through the first shock began to bend under genuine sadness. Her family's position near the monarchy remained entirely conditional, welcomed in private, but stopped abruptly at the edge of public sovereign ritual. Prince William did not escape the collateral damage either, as his secretaries discovered that the original list had already reached several external offices, making the correction visible to many analytical eyes. King Charles was explicitly warned by advisors that intervening would place him in dangerous conflict with the decree and the heir's authority. Amid the internal hurt, a private conversation forced William and Charles to speak directly without advisors. The monarchy had demanded firmness from the heir, but fatherhood now demanded honesty from the king. Charles spoke first, stating simply that Camilla felt punished. William answered with transparent honesty, explaining that punishment was never the purpose, but protection was, as the institution could not survive unclear boundaries in public ceremony. William then promised that Camilla's daughter would not be humiliated publicly, even though the structural boundary would stand firm. By the time the ceremony approached, the public saw her absolute absence and the palace machine adjusting around a missing figure. A major newspaper front page ran a stark diagram of the balcony with one space left completely blank, declaring that William had officially drawn the line. Camilla felt deeply bruised, William felt heavily burdened, and Charles felt the ache of split loyalties. But the hidden decree stood firm, proving that the future crown would be governed by boundaries, not emotional exceptions.